I've always believed in balance. Work hard, play hard, be kind, but never a pushover. Keep my emotions in check, and never, ever, let anyone see what gets under my skin. And yet, Ryan Darcy, he's been getting under my skin since the day we became roommates. Move, I say flatly, standing in the doorway to the kitchen. Ryan is leaning against the counter, blocking the coffee machine like he has nowhere else to be. He smirks, sipping from his obnoxiously oversized mug. What's the magic word? I exhale slowly through my nose. Ryan, that's not it. I step forward, reaching past him to grab the coffee pot, but he shifts just enough to make it difficult. The tension is so thick I could choke on it. This is how it always is between us, a constant push and pull, like neither of us is willing to admit who has the upper hand. And maybe that's because we don't know who does. Colin walks in, glancing between us with a knowing look. You two are at it again? Eason follows, raising an eyebrow. Why don't you just kiss and get it over with? Ryan snorts. In your dreams, Knight. Eason shrugs. Not mine, but clearly someone's. His gaze flicks to me, and I roll my eyes, pretending my face isn't heating up. Ryan grins at me like he knows exactly what I'm thinking. Asshole. Colin sighs dramatically. Can you two just admit there's something going on? The whole enemies to lovers thing is getting old. I scoff. We're not enemies. Ryan leans in, voice dropping just enough to make my pulse stutter. And we're definitely not lovers. I hate how my stomach flips at the way he says it. I hate how easy it is for him to get a reaction out of me. Eason smirks. Give it time. I shake my head and pour my coffee, ignoring the way Ryan watches me over the rim of his mug. This isn't a game I plan to lose. Whatever this tension between us is, I'll keep it buried. Controlled. Because if there's one thing I know about Ryan Darcy, it's that he's dangerous, and I can't afford to let him win. Movie night in our shared apartment had always been a casual thing. Blankets strewn across the couch, a ridiculous amount of snacks, and the four of us arguing over which film to watch. But tonight, something felt different. I slouched comfortably at one end of the couch, nursing a beer, while Ryan sat on the other, flipping through streaming options. Colin and Eason had squeezed into the armchair together, leaving the entire couch to me and Ryan. Not horror, Colin declared immediately. Not romance, Ryan countered. Not another mind-numbing action flick, I said, shooting Ryan a smirk. I know you only pick those because you think explosions will distract from your lack of taste. Ryan scoffed. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Indie films with subtitles, but not everyone wants to spend 2 hours deciphering existential metaphors. Maybe if you had more than 2 brain cells to rub together. Eason sighed dramatically, cutting off our bickering. Just put on something neutral before you two start throwing punches. We settled on a thriller, something suspenseful but not outright terrifying. As the opening credits rolled, I stretched my arms along the back of the couch. Casually, of course. My fingers barely grazed Ryan's shoulder, and I didn't move them. Not really. Ryan didn't react. But he also didn't pull away. I let myself smirk. Interesting. The movie played, but I wasn't paying much attention. I was too focused on the way Ryan shifted slightly, as if aware of our proximity. It was subtle. His shoulders tensed when I adjusted my arm. His jaw clenched when our thighs brushed. I was testing the boundaries, and Ryan was failing at pretending it wasn't affecting him. Halfway through the film, there was a particularly tense moment on screen. A well-executed jump scare that had Colin letting out an undignified yelp. Eason snorted, wrapping an arm around him in amusement, while Ryan flinched, barely noticeable. I leaned in, lowering my voice. You scared, Ree? Ryan turned, his eyes flashing in the dim light. Of a cheap jump scare? Please. I smirked. You sure? Because your arm just twitched. I swear to. Ryan cut himself off, realizing too late that I had managed to scoot closer, our knees pressing together. Instead of pulling away, I let my fingers shift lower on the couch, ghosting against the fabric of Ryan's hoodie. Still no reaction. Or rather, an obvious attempt at not reacting. The tension crackled between us, thick and undeniable. I was used to teasing Ryan, pushing his buttons, but this felt different. Like I was towing the line between our usual rivalry and something else entirely. The question was, how much further could I push before Ryan snapped? As if sensing my thoughts, Ryan finally moved. Not to jerk away, but to turn his attention back to the screen, pointedly ignoring me. I almost laughed. Coward. When the credits finally rolled, Colin stretched with a groan. Okay, bedtime. Some of us have to function like adults tomorrow. Eason snorted. Sure you do. As Colin and Eason disappeared into their shared room, Ryan stood, rolling his shoulders like he was shaking something off. I stayed seated, watching him with that same lazy smirk. Something wrong, I drawled. Ryan met my gaze, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Nope. But as he turned to leave, I caught the slight hesitation in his step, the way his fingers curled into fists for just a second before relaxing. I grinned to myself. Very interesting. Parties at our apartment were a common occurrence, but tonight felt different. The air buzzed with energy, music pulsed through the speakers, laughter filled the space, and half-empty bottles of beer and whiskey littered the table. Colin and Eason had disappeared somewhere, no doubt wrapped up in their own world, leaving Ryan and me in the living room with a handful of friends. And, of course, a drinking game in full swing. Truth or dare? Someone slurred, barely holding themselves upright on the couch. Ryan, sitting across from me, rolled his eyes. Aren't we past this level of immaturity? I smirked, leaning forward, elbows resting on my knees. Scared, Ree? His gaze snapped to mine, sharp and irritated. Of a dumb game? Please. Good, I said smoothly, grabbing the bottle to spin it. It landed on some guy I barely knew, who picked truth and was forced to admit he once cried watching a car commercial. The game went on, getting more ridiculous with each round. Then, finally, the bottle landed on Ryan. Dare, he said immediately, like he had something to prove. I let my smirk widen. Kiss me. The noise around us dulled. Conversation stuttered, and I caught the way a few people exchanged glances, waiting for Ryan's reaction. But my focus was locked on him. Ryan blinked, then scoffed. That's it. That's your dare. I shrugged, feigning nonchalance. Unless you're scared. His jaw clenched, and I knew I had him. There was no way Ryan Darcy would back down from a challenge, especially not one I had thrown in his face. His competitive streak wouldn't allow it. Fine, he said, like it was nothing. Like it didn't matter. He shifted forward, closing the space between us. I expected him to go for a quick, dismissive peck, to do it and be done with it. But the moment his lips met mine, something shifted. The kiss was supposed to be a joke, a dare, but his lips were warm, firm, lingering longer than necessary. The world seemed to slow, the distant sounds of the party fading. Ryan didn't pull away immediately, and I didn't either. It was brief, but the weight of it, the heat, it wasn't something either of us could ignore. Then, just as quickly, he broke away. Laughter erupted around us, someone whistled, and Ryan grabbed his drink, downing half of it in one go. See? No big deal, he said, voice a touch too casual. I tilted my head, watching him closely. Yeah, sure. No big deal. But the way he avoided my gaze told me everything. This wasn't over. Nights like these were supposed to be easy. Casual. Just another evening lounging around the apartment, avoiding responsibilities. But ever since that damn drinking game, nothing had felt casual between me and Ryan. I told myself it was all in my head, that he was acting normal. But I caught the way he avoided eye contact, the way his shoulders tensed when I got too close, the way he downed his drinks faster than usual. Which is why, when he stood up abruptly from the couch and nearly knocked over the coffee table, I wasn't all that surprised. Jesus, Ryan. Colin muttered from his spot next to Eason. You good? Yeah, fine, Ryan said too quickly, waving him off before making a beeline for the kitchen. I waited a beat before following. Ryan was at the fridge, grabbing a bottle of water, his back to me. Don't you have anything better to do than follow me around? He grumbled. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Not really. He turned, expression flat. Leo. Ryan. He sighed, twisting the cap off and taking a long drink, probably hoping I'd drop whatever conversation he thought I was about to start. But that wasn't how this worked. I took a step closer. He didn't back away, but his grip tightened around the bottle. Are you going to keep pretending that kiss didn't happen? I asked. Ryan choked. He coughed, sputtering, and I bit back a grin. You? He started, then scowled. You mean the stupid dare? Yeah, I wasn't pretending. It was just a game. Not that one. Ryan froze. What? This one? I wasn't even thinking. Or maybe I was. Maybe I had been waiting for an excuse, a moment, any opportunity to push him further. I shifted forward just as he moved, and suddenly, our lips collided. It wasn't planned. It wasn't some grand, calculated move. It was just two idiots in a cramped kitchen, making a series of bad decisions in real time. Ryan stiffened immediately, but he didn't pull away. For a second, just a second, I felt him waver. Then, like a switch flipped, he jerked back, his breathing unsteady, eyes wide. You? His voice was hoarse. You did that on purpose. I smirked. You walked into me. He looked utterly betrayed by his own coordination. That was an accident. Sure, I said, tilting my head. Keep telling yourself that. Ryan made a sound of pure frustration, running a hand through his hair before grabbing his water and storming past me. I let him go. After all, I didn't need to chase him. He was already running straight toward the truth. I turned back toward the living room, only to find Colin and Eason standing at the kitchen entrance, both looking way too entertained for my liking. Well, Colin said, taking a slow sip of his drink. That was interesting. Eason smirked, leaning against the doorframe. I'd say that was more than interesting. Ryan practically short-circuited. I rolled my eyes. Feel free to mind your own business anytime. Colin grinned. Oh, but Leo, when have we ever done that? Eason chuckled. And why would we stop now? That was the best entertainment we've had all week. I exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over my face. You two are bastards. Colin shrugged. Nah, we're just enjoying the view. I glared at them, but they only laughed, clearly having the time of their lives at my expense. I wasn't sure who was worse, Ryan for running or these two for making sure I never heard the end of it. Ryan was avoiding me. Badly. After the kitchen incident, he made himself scarce, which was impressive considering we lived in the same apartment. It was like he had mastered the art of slipping away just as I entered a room, dodging conversations, and making sure there was always someone else between us during movie nights. Childish, really. And honestly, it was pissing me off. I let it slide for a couple of days, just to see how long he could keep it up. But by the third night, when he bailed on our usual post-dinner cleanup duty, I'd had enough. I found him in his bedroom, sprawled on his bed with his phone in hand, earphones plugged in. Typical. If ignoring me were an Olympic sport, he'd be a gold medalist. I didn't bother knocking. I just walked in. Ryan's head snapped up. He pulled out one earbud and scowled. Ever heard of privacy? Ever heard of not being a coward? I shot back, shutting the door behind me. His expression flickered, but he masked it quickly, swinging his legs off the bed. What do you want, Leo? I folded my arms and leaned against the door. You tell me. You're the one who's been playing hide-and-seek all week. I've been busy. Bullshit. Ryan sighed and rubbed a hand down his face. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, come on. I stepped closer, watching as his posture stiffened. You flinched every time I so much as looked at you yesterday, and now you're suddenly too busy to be in the same room as me. He scoffed. You're imagining things. Right. I smirked, taking another step forward. And I suppose I imagined that kiss too? Ryan's jaw clenched. It was an accident. You sure about that? His fists curled at his sides. It doesn't matter, doesn't it? I tilted my head. Because you're acting like it does. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked away, staring at the floor like it held all the answers to his problems. That was the thing about Ryan. He thought he had himself all figured out. He thought he could control everything, including his own feelings. But I knew better. I took the last step, closing the distance between us. His breath hitched. I don't get you, I murmured. You push, you pull, which is it, Ryan? His fingers twitched. I don't. The door suddenly swung open, and Colin's voice cut through the tension. Hey, are you two? Oh. Eason, right behind him, raised an eyebrow. Interrupting something? Ryan practically leapt away from me. No. Colin's gaze flicked between us before he smirked. Could have fooled me. I sighed, stepping back and shoving my hands in my pockets. What do you want? Just checking if you were alive, Colin said. Since Ryan's been acting like a ghost lately. Ryan groaned. Not you two. Eason chuckled. Hard not to notice when you turn into a flight risk every time Leo enters the room. Ryan scowled. I hate all of you. Colin grinned. You love us. Ryan shot him a glare before turning back to me. His walls were back up, his posture defensive. We done here? I studied him for a moment before smirking. For now. He exhaled, brushing past me toward the door, where Colin and Eason were still loitering. Move. Colin chuckled, but stepped aside. Eason gave me a knowing look before following Ryan out. I stayed behind, letting out a slow breath. He could run all he wanted. Sooner or later, he'd have to stop pretending. Ryan was a lot of things, a pain in the ass, an expert at avoidance, and a world-class coward when it came to facing his feelings. But subtle? Not even close. So when he spent the entire night at the bar openly flirting with some guy whose name he probably didn't even remember, it was obvious what he was trying to do. And it was working. Not in the way he wanted, though. I wasn't jealous. I refused to be jealous. I was just, okay, maybe I was losing my mind a little. It wasn't just that he was flirting. It was how he was doing it. The way he laughed a little too loudly. The way his hand lingered a second too long on the guy's arm. The way he kept sneaking glances my way to make sure I was watching. He wanted a reaction. Fine. He was about to get one. I took my time finishing my drink before sliding off my stool and making my way across the room. I didn't have a plan, not really. Just a burning desire to make sure Ryan knew exactly how stupid he was being. When I reached him, he was in the middle of some exaggerated story, his audience completely enthralled, until I stepped into his space, cutting off whatever nonsense he was spewing. Leo, Ryan greeted, flashing me an infuriatingly smug smile. Didn't see you there. Liar. I smiled back, all teeth, all warning. Funny. You kept looking this way, so I assumed you did. His grin faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered, leaning against the bar like he wasn't at all bothered by my sudden presence. Something you need? Yeah. I took another step forward, forcing him to tilt his head to maintain eye contact. You to cut the bullshit. The guy he was flirting with cleared his throat awkwardly. I'm gonna. Yeah, you should, I said, not even glancing his way. He took the hint, slipping off his stool and disappearing into the crowd. Ryan exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. That was rude. That was necessary. What's your problem? You. His lips parted, surprise flickering in his eyes before frustration took its place. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. You've been acting like a damn idiot all night, trying to get a rise out of me. Congratulations, Ryan. You win. I'm pissed. Now what? He scoffed, crossing his arms. You're being ridiculous. And you're being a coward. That hit its mark. His entire body went rigid, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. Good. I wanted him to feel as unhinged as I did. I wanted him to stop running, stop pretending, stop playing these fucking games. I stepped even closer, my voice lower now, rougher. You don't want him. You don't want anyone else. So tell me, Ryan, why the hell are you pretending? He swallowed hard, his throat working, his breath coming out uneven. I'm not. I reached up, brushing my fingers along his jaw, tilting his chin up just slightly. Say it again. Look me in the eye and tell me I'm wrong. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, but no words came out. I let my fingers linger for a moment longer before stepping back, putting space between us before I did something we'd both regret, or something we wouldn't be able to take back. That's what I thought, I said, my voice softer now, but no less certain. Ryan stood there, his hands still clenched, his entire body wound so tight I thought he might snap. But he didn't say a word as I turned and walked away. I didn't need him to. I'd already won this round. The thing about living with Colin and Eason was that they were always up to something. Whether it was a ridiculous argument about takeout, an intense Mario Kart rivalry, or their ongoing bet about finding Colin a boyfriend, chaos followed them everywhere. And this time, that chaos had somehow dragged me and Ryan into it. It started innocently enough, another night in, everyone lounging in the living room with drinks in hand. Colin and Eason were in the middle of their usual back and forth about whether Eason had actually helped Colin get together with him, or if Colin had just given in to the inevitable. I wasn't really paying attention until Colin turned, eyes gleaming with something dangerous. You know, he said slowly, this whole bet thing really worked out for me. Eason smirked. That's because I'm a genius. Ryan scoffed, taking a sip of his beer. You're insufferable, is what you are. Colin ignored him, looking straight at me. What do you think, Leo? Maybe you and Ryan need a little push too. I raised an eyebrow. A push. You two have been dancing around each other for, what? Years. Colin leaned forward, grinning. How about a bet? Ryan, who had been in the middle of drinking, nearly choked. Absolutely not. Eason laughed. You don't even know what the bet is yet. Ryan shot him a glare. I don't care. I'm not getting involved in whatever scheming bullshit you two are pulling. Colin waved him off. Relax, it's just a friendly wager. If Leo wins, you have to admit that you're into him. Silence. Ryan went rigid. My lips curled into a slow smirk. And if he wins? Colin shrugged. Then you drop it. No more teasing, no more pushing. You let him be. Ryan was already shaking his head. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I tilted my head. Scared you'll lose? Ryan turned to me, eyes narrowing. You can't just bet on someone's feelings. Eason chuckled. You mean like how you keep pretending yours don't exist? Ryan groaned, rubbing a hand down his face. You're all the worst. I leaned in, voice dropping just enough to make sure only Ryan heard me. Come on, Ree. What's the harm? Unless you really think I'll win. His jaw clenched. He hated being backed into a corner, but he hated losing even more. Finally, with a glare that could set things on fire, he muttered, Fine. But when I win, you better back the hell off. I grinned. Deal. Oh, he had no idea what he'd just gotten himself into. For weeks, we had been circling each other, testing limits, towing the line between playful and something else. Something heavier. Something dangerous. Ryan had always been good at pretending. He laughed off my teasing, rolled his eyes at my comments, shoved me away whenever I got too close. But he never really left. He stayed. And staying meant something, even if he refused to admit it. Tonight, I was going to make him admit it. The apartment was quiet. Colin and Eason were out on one of their ridiculous late-night food runs, and Ryan had been sulking in the living room since they left, flipping through channels without actually watching anything. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, taking my time as I studied him. Sulking doesn't suit you, Darcy. Ryan didn't even look up. Not sulking, just enjoying the peace before you inevitably ruin it. I smirked. What? Am I that distracting? He scoffed, but his grip on the remote tightened. Interesting. I walked over, plucking the remote from his hand before he could react, and tossing it onto the couch. Then I sat down next to him, way too close, our knees knocking together. He tensed immediately, but he didn't pull away. Leo, you never answered my question. I interrupted, voice low. Are you scared of losing? Ryan exhaled sharply. Jesus, we're still on that. We never left it. He turned his head then, and our faces were inches apart, close enough that I could see the frustration burning in his dark eyes, the tension thrumming beneath his skin. He was holding himself together by a thread. I wanted to snap it. This is a game to you, isn't it? He said, voice rough. Not at all. I lifted a hand, fingers barely grazing his jaw. He stiffened, but didn't pull back. That was all the invitation I needed. Tell me to stop, Darcy, I murmured. Say the words, and I will. Silence. A long, heavy silence where his breathing got just a little too uneven, his lips parting just slightly, as if he was right on the edge of saying something real. But he didn't. Instead, he surged forward. The moment our lips met, the world tilted. Ryan kissed like he did everything else, recklessly, with too much force, like he was trying to prove a point. I let him. Let him press me back against the couch, his hands gripping the front of my shirt like he needed something to hold on to. But I wasn't about to let him think he was in control. I bit down on his lower lip, and he gasped. The sound shot straight through me, and suddenly, I wasn't playing anymore. I flipped us, pinning him beneath me, swallowing the curse that left his lips as I deepened the kiss, pushing him until his back hit the cushions. He should have stopped me. This was his chance. He could have shoved me away, laughed it off, pretended this was just another moment of us pushing boundaries for the fun of it. But he didn't. He pulled me closer, and I was never letting him go. Waking up next to Ryan Darcy was not an unfamiliar experience. Waking up next to him like this, with our bodies tangled together, the scent of last night still lingering between us, was an entirely different story. I blinked against the soft morning light filtering through the blinds, letting my gaze settle on him. His dark hair was a mess, lips slightly parted, face buried half in the pillow. Peaceful, completely unaware that the moment he woke up, he was going to lose his damn mind. I smirked to myself. This was going to be fun. As if on cue, Ryan shifted, a low groan escaping him as his hand brushed against my bare chest. He stiffened. A second later, his entire body jerked away like he'd been burned. Eyes snapped open, meeting mine with pure, unfiltered panic. Oh, fuck. His voice was hoarse, his breathing uneven. No. I propped myself up on an elbow, watching with thinly veiled amusement as he scrambled to sit up, hands gripping the sheets like they were the last thing tethering him to reality. Good morning to you too, Darcy. Ryan's gaze darted around the room as if searching for an escape route. When he didn't find one, he settled for glaring at me instead. Tell me this didn't happen. I stretched, making a show of the movement, my smirk widening when his eyes flickered downward for just a second before snapping back up. I could, I said lazily. But I'd be lying. Ryan exhaled sharply, dragging a hand down his face. Shit. What's the big deal? I asked, tilting my head. You seemed pretty into it last night. His head snapped toward me. Don't what? I leaned in slightly. Remind you how you were the one who kissed me first? How you were the one who didn't stop? His jaw tightened. I wasn't thinking clearly. I raised an eyebrow. Right. So, what's your excuse for all the other times you've looked at me like you wanted to do exactly what we did last night? Silence. A muscle in his jaw twitched, but he didn't answer. I sighed dramatically, flopping back against the pillows. Honestly, I thought you'd have a better reaction than this. Maybe some poetic post-sex epiphany. Ryan let out a strangled sound. Are you seriously joking right now? I gave him an innocent look. I cope in my own ways. He muttered something under his breath that I didn't quite catch before shoving the blankets off and standing up, only to realize that he wasn't wearing much of anything. He froze. Oh my God. His voice was barely above a whisper, as if saying it any louder would somehow make it worse. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Ryan shot me a murderous glare and grabbed the nearest article of clothing he could find, my shirt. He yanked it over his head like it was armor and turned away, shoulders tense. I can't, he said suddenly, voice lower now. I stilled, watching the way his fingers curled into the hem of the shirt, my shirt. You can't what? He didn't answer. Instead, he took a breath and muttered, this never happened. Then he strode toward the door like he was escaping a crime scene. I let out a long breath, running a hand through my hair. Oh, Ryan, you really think you can pretend nothing's changed? I smirked to myself, already knowing the answer. We'll see about that. The thing about living with Colin and Eason was that nothing went unnoticed for long. They had their own brand of chaos, sure, but they also had an uncanny ability to see through bullshit, especially when it came to Ryan. And lately, Ryan had been acting like a man on the verge of a breakdown. I noticed it first in the little things. The way he barely looked at me when we crossed paths in the apartment. The way he'd tense whenever I got too close, like he was bracing for impact. The way he avoided movie nights, dinner plans, any scenario where we'd be in the same room for too long. It was almost funny how predictable he was. Colin noticed next. And unlike me, he wasn't content with just watching the train wreck unfold. You and Ryan are weird, he said bluntly one night, plopping down onto the couch beside me. Weirder than usual. Eason, who had just walked in with a bowl of popcorn, snorted. That's an understatement. Ryan looks like he's about to have an aneurysm every time Leo breathes near him. I smirked. He's dramatic like that. Colin eyed me suspiciously. So, what happened? I stretched out, deliberately casual. Nothing. Eason threw a piece of popcorn at me. Bullshit. Something happened, and whatever it was, Ryan is losing his mind over it. Colin leaned in, his grin turning sharp. Wait. Did you too? He gasped theatrically. Oh my God. You did, didn't you? I didn't answer, but my smirk deepened. Eason groaned. Jesus. You actually broke him. More like cracked him, I said. He's the one running. Colin clapped his hands together. All right, we need to fix this. I raised an eyebrow. Fix what? Ryan. Colin gestured vaguely toward Ryan's closed bedroom door, as if that explained everything. He's an emotionally stunted mess who refuses to deal with his feelings, and quite frankly, I'm tired of watching him implode. Eason grinned. So what's the plan? Colin's eyes gleamed with mischief. Simple. We make him admit it. Ryan never saw it coming. The moment he stepped into the kitchen the next morning, bleary-eyed and in desperate need of caffeine, Colin pounced. Morning, lover boy. Ryan froze mid-step. What? Eason leaned against the counter, far too amused. Rough night. Ryan shot them both a look that could peel paint off the walls. I don't know what you're talking about. Colin hummed. Sure you don't. He turned to me, feigning confusion. Hey, Leo, do you know what we're talking about? I took a slow sip of my coffee. Not a clue. Ryan exhaled sharply. I hate all of you. Colin leaned in, voice dropping just enough to make it dangerous. You can hate us all you want, but that doesn't change the fact that you're acting real weird around Leo. Ryan scoffed. I am not. Avoiding him? Colin interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Flinching whenever he so much as looks at you? Eason smirked, acting like you saw the face of God and didn't know whether to worship or run. Ryan's jaw clenched. You guys are insufferable. Colin grinned. And you're in denial. Ryan looked at me then, as if expecting me to shut them up. I didn't. I just watched, waiting, wondering how long it would take for him to finally crack. It didn't take long. Fine, Ryan snapped. You want me to admit something? Here it is. I don't know what the hell is happening between me and Leo. I don't know what to do with it. And I sure as hell don't need the two of you breathing down my neck about it. Silence. Then Colin clapped his hands. Progress. Ryan groaned, pressing the heels of his palms into his eyes. I hate this apartment. Eason snorted. Liar. Ryan turned to me then, something unreadable in his gaze. Frustration. Uncertainty. Want. I just smiled. Whenever you're ready, Ree. He didn't answer, but the way his fingers curled against the counter, the way he exhaled slowly like he was trying to keep himself together, I knew. Denial wasn't going to work much longer. Ryan Darcy was a master of deflection. He could roll his eyes, scoff, and turn anything into a joke, but right now, none of that was working. Because I wasn't letting him get away with it. I had given him space. I had given him time. I had even let him run after that night in my bed, pretending I didn't see the way his hands had lingered, the way his breath had hitched when I pulled him closer. But patience had never been my strong suit, and I was done waiting for him to catch up. Ryan stood by the window in our shared apartment, arms crossed, staring out at nothing. I leaned against the couch, watching him. He hadn't said a word since I told him we needed to talk, which was already a bad sign. So what's the excuse this time? I asked. Gonna tell me it didn't mean anything? That it was just some mistake? His jaw tightened. I don't. He exhaled sharply, raking a hand through his already messy hair. I don't know what you want me to say. Try the truth. I stepped closer, pushing. Always pushing. You're scared. He scoffed, turning to glare at me. I'm not scared. No? Then why do you keep running every time we get close? He didn't answer, but he didn't deny it either. I sighed, shaking my head. You're making this so much harder than it has to be, Ree. Ryan let out a humorless laugh. Oh yeah? And what exactly is this, Leo? What do you even want from me? I stared at him, letting him see every bit of my frustration. I want you. I've always wanted you. And I know you want me too. But I'm done playing this game. Either you admit it, or I walk away. His breath hitched, and for the first time, real panic flashed across his face. You don't mean that. I do. My voice was steady, firm. Because I can't keep doing this. I can't keep being the only one fighting for something that should be fucking obvious by now. Ryan swallowed hard, looking away. His fingers clenched into fists at his sides. I can't. There it was again. Those same words he whispered that night when I kissed him breathless, and he kissed me right back. I could have let it go. I could have left it alone. But I refused to be his regret. I stepped into his space, forcing him to look at me. Can't what, Ryan? Can't admit it? Can't want me? Or can't handle the fact that this, US, is real? His breathing was uneven now, his whole body tense. I don't know how to do this, he muttered. I don't know how to be. With me? I finished for him. You already are. You just have to stop pretending it's something else. Silence stretched between us. Then, Ryan's hands fisted in my shirt, yanking me forward as his mouth crashed against mine. It wasn't careful or hesitant. It was desperate, raw, and filled with every ounce of tension we'd been ignoring for too damn long. When he finally pulled away, he was breathing hard, his forehead resting against mine. You're right, he whispered. I'm scared, but I don't want to lose you more. My chest tightened, and I let out a slow breath. Then stop running, Ree. His grip on me tightened. I'll try. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a grand confession. But for Ryan Darcy, it was everything. I used to think I had all the patience in the world when it came to Ryan Darcy. He could push me away, deny what was right in front of him, and act like this was all some ridiculous game, but I never stopped wanting him. And after last night, there was no going back. He was still asleep when I woke up, his face relaxed in a way it never was when he was awake. No tension in his jaw, no sharp comebacks waiting on his tongue. Just Ryan. My Ryan. The thought made my chest tighten, and I reached out on instinct, fingers brushing lightly against his cheek. He stirred, eyelashes fluttering before his eyes finally opened. For a second, there was peace. Then realization slammed into him. and he tensed beneath my touch. I smirked. "Morning, Darcy." He groaned and turned over, face buried in the pillow. "Don't call me that." "Why not?" "It suits you." "Because I know why you're doing it." His voice was muffled, but I could still hear the annoyance laced in it. "And I refuse to be part of your literary fantasies." I laughed, rolling onto my side so I could look at him. Too late. Bennett and Darcy are already a classic pairing. He peeked at me from the pillow, eyes narrowed. "I hate you." "No, you don't." I reached for him, fingers skimming over his bare shoulder. "So, are you going to run again, or are you finally going to stop fighting this?" His body stiffened, and I could practically hear the war waging in his head. Then, slowly, he let out a breath and rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling. "I don't want to lose." Something inside me cracked. "Ryan, I don't mean the bet." He turned his head to look at me, eyes dark with something raw, something vulnerable. "I mean you. Us." For all his stubbornness, for all the walls he put up, that was the closest to an admission I'd ever get. And it was enough. I shifted closer, pressing a kiss to the corner of his mouth. "Then don't." And this time, he didn't pull away. If Ryan thought we could keep this a secret, he was dead wrong. We barely made it to breakfast before Colin raised an eyebrow at Ryan's disheveled appearance. Eason, ever the instigator, smirked over his coffee. "So, Ryan, sleep well?" Ryan froze mid-sip, nearly choking. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Colin shrugged. "Just that you look well-rested. And also like someone who had a life-changing epiphany." "I hate all of you," Ryan muttered, setting his coffee down way too aggressively. I slung an arm around his shoulders, grinning. "You know, I think I like it when they're on my side for once." He shot me a glare, but didn't shake me off. "Progress." Colin smirked. "So does this mean I finally won my bet?" Eason scoffed. "Excuse me, but I'm the one who orchestrated half of this." Ryan groaned. "There was never a bet about us." Colin exchanged a look with Eason. "Oh, sweet summer child." I laughed, pressing a quick kiss to Ryan's temple just to watch his face go red. "Face it, Darcy. Everyone knew before you did." Ryan huffed, but didn't argue. And honestly, that was the best part. Later that night, when it was just the two of us in my room, he leaned against me with a sigh. "This is going to be a disaster, isn't it?" I kissed the top of his head, arms tightening around him. "Nah, it's going to be a challenge. But then again, we've never been boring." He snorted. "Yeah, well, don't think I'm going easy on you just because we're together now." I grinned. "Wouldn't dream of it." And with that, Leo Bennett and Ryan Darcy officially left the friend zone. About damn time.